I looked through pages and pages of tournament results to find the best performing rogue decks in the Temporal Forces format from Japanese City League events. Today we'll look at more than 15 different rogue decks, looking for the most interesting cards I could find making top 8 or higher at events. We'll start with first place deck lists, work our way down to top 8, starting with this first place Arceus Armarouge deck. Now, Arceus Armarouge is something that we have admittedly seen before, but I've never seen it used with the Armarouge EX. Armarouge EX is a stage 1 fire type Pokemon with the ability Crimson Armor. If this Pokemon has full HP, it takes 80 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. So that's going to make it essentially 340 HP to one-shot it. And then it has the Scorching Bazooka attack, which does 40 damage plus 40 more damage for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon. And that is potentially where the non-EX Armarouge can come in, switching fire energy from your benched Pokemon, probably Pokemon that you use Trinity Nova to accelerate energy to, so some V Pokemon, and move those energies up to Armarouge EX. The only new card this deck includes from Temporal Forces is the A-Spec Prime Catcher, which is one of the most powerful cards from the new set, so we'll see that being included in plenty of deck lists. Next is a Charizard Bibarel deck with a 2/2 line of Arceus VSTAR in it, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because if you take out the 2/2 Arceus VSTAR line, this is technically not a rogue deck. This is just Charizard Bibarel, but I did want to share this because it got first place at a Japanese City League with 64 players at it, so that's a pretty good result to see. And the 2/2 Arceus V-Star line is definitely not common in Charizard EX decks, so I wanted to highlight this, talk about Arceus V-Star. It has the Starbirth ability, of course, that's going to allow you to search for any 2 cards. So this is being played as opposed to something like the Pidgeot EX line, which can search for 1 card, but it can do it every turn. The pro to Arceus is that it doesn't need rare candy like Pidgeot EX does, so this deck list can run just 3 rare candy. As for the new cards, it's just going to be the Prime Catcher again, and 3 of the Buddy Buddy Poffin to find your Charmanders, your Bidoofs, and your Jirachi. Unfortunately, now that VIP Pass has rotated, that Buddy Buddy Poffin's not going to be able to find your Arceus V, so that makes running Arceus V-Star here even more awkward than it already was. Next, we have a first place Espathra EX Xatu deck. Espathra EX is a Grass type EX Terra Pokemon with 260 HP. It has the ability Dazzling Gaze. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, attacks used by your opponent's active Pokemon cost 1 colorless more. And then Cybele does 30 damage plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. So you can power up your own Espathra EX with the help of Xatu, which we'll look at in just a second here. But you can also do more damage if your opponent is using Pokemon that need more energy on them, and your Dazzling Gaze ability is going to force them to need at least 1 extra energy. Now, this deck is using some disruption tactics. In addition to that Dazzling Gaze, it's going to force them to need more energy. It's also running Eri to discard item cards, and Crushing Hammer to discard energy cards, and Technical Machine De-Evolution to devolve your opponent's Pokemon, Hero's Cape as the A-Spec of choice to buff Espathra EX all the way up to 360 health, which is really crazy. This Hero's Cape is going to really put some crazy HP numbers in the game when it's being played. Also, for a little disruption, you got the Flutter Mane that turns off your opponent's active Pokemon's ability when it's active. We do have a non-EX Espathra in here as well, with the ability Stance. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may prevent all damage from and effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon until the end of your opponent's turn. So essentially, when you evolve this from Flittle into Espathra, your opponent can't damage or affect or anything this Espathra for 1 turn with attacks. So you can have it up in the active as a bit of a wall, and the Glittering Eyes attack will do 70 or 140 if you have the supporter Tulip in your discard pile. Tulip puts up to 4 in any combination of Psychic Pokemon and Basic Psychic Energy from your discard pile into your hand, so that works well with Xatu. So if you have this in the discard, your Espathra will evolve, be immune for a turn, and swing for 140, which is really not bad at all. Now the Xatu, like I mentioned, that's going to be a key part of this deck. It has the ability Clairvoyant Sense. Once during your turn, you may attach a basic Psychic Energy card from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon. If you attach an energy this way, draw 2 cards. So it does have to be a Psychic Energy from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon, but it also draws you cards. If this was just anywhere, if this could go to the active, that would obviously be great. That's definitely one of the shortcomings of this Xatu card. Moving on to a first place Gholdengo EX Dudunsparce deck. Now Gholdengo EX is on the lower end of being a meta deck, but definitely not with this new Dudunsparce. That's what's going to get it into today's Rogue Decks video. The new Dudunsparce has the ability Runaway Draw. Once during your turn, you may draw 3 cards, then shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into your deck. So Gholdengo EX has the Make It Rain attack. It's going to do 50 damage for every basic energy you discard from your hand, and Dudunsparce is going to help you find your pieces that you need to make that attack do as much damage as possible. It's going to help you find energy cards. It's going to help you find superior energy retrieval, earthen vessel, energy retrieval, maybe even your gust effects like boss, prime catcher, and counter catcher. This deck is also playing the brand new Cypher Maniacs Code Breaking, which is an incredible card. It allows you to search your deck for 2 cards and put those on top of your deck. And then that's going to mean that Gholdengo EX's coin bonus, the Dudunsparce, Radiant Greninja, even Pokestop can draw into those cards. Pokestop only if they're item cards, of course, but you're going to be able to put your combo pieces up there. Get like Prime Catcher plus Superior Energy Retrieval, or boss and superior energy retrieval, maybe boss for next turn, but yeah, prime catcher, counter catcher, superior energy retrieval are going to be really great targets from the Cypher Maniacs. Get those cards that you need at specific times, put them on your deck, and then just draw into them with one of your many ways to do so. Next, we have a first place Miraidon EX deck. The new cards in this deck list are Prime Catcher and Rescue Board. Rescue Board giving Pokemon 1 less retreat cost, and if they have 30 HP or less remaining, their retreat cost is free instead. Now, this is a deck that pre-rotation would not be in a Rogue Decks video, because Miraidon EX has been pretty successful in the Paradox Rift standard format. But after rotation, with it losing Flaffy and Temporal Forces bringing the future variant of Iron Hands EX, the Turbo Iron Hands EX deck with Iron Crown, and the new baby Miraidon with the future tag, Miraidon EX has fallen off in the midst of all of this. This deck is playing 20 Lightning Energy and 2 Double Turbo Energy, so heavily relying on the electric generators to accelerate energy onto your Pokemon, and you're trying to get 2 energy every single time with the amount of energy in this deck. So with 22 energy in the deck, probably plays like a theme deck, but it did get a first place, and it's not a meta deck in the post-rotation format as far as I know, so that's why it is here today. Moving on to a second place Meowscarada EX Pidgeot EX deck. Meowscarada EX has the Bouquet Magic ability, which allows you to discard a basic grass energy from your hand and put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And the Scratching Nails attack, which does 100 plus 120 more if the defending Pokemon already has damage on it. So Meowscarada EX is a really cool card. It has decent HP, it has an attack that's easy enough to use, and an ability that's easy enough to use that also spreads some damage. Now, these Pokemon that ping damage around, like Meowscarada EX, like Iron Valiant EX, these decks did lose Medicham V. All the Rapid Strike Pokemon rotated out, and Medicham V was a big combo piece to play with these decks that can poke little bits of damage around and spread damage on your opponent's board. However, Meowscarada EX does hit Charizard EX for weakness, which is always a nice thing to have since Charizard EX is a very popular and very strong archetype. As for new cards in this deck, we just have the 4 Buddy Poffin, which is better than VIP Pass for this deck since all of the Pokemon that you want to put on your bench, except for Radiant Alakazam, can be searched by Buddy Poffin, except it's all game, not like Battle VIP Pass that was only on the first turn. So this is a deck that actually prefers Buddy Poffin, which is neat. And then we also have 1 Master Ball Ace spec in this deck as well. Who expected 2 Espathra EX Xatu decks in today's video? This is the 3rd place Espathra deck with Banette EX. Of course, we know what Espathra EX does. It's grass type, so it can hit Charizard. The Dazzling Gaze makes your opponent's Pokemon need extra energy. And I love that this deck is also playing the Pokemon League Headquarters. So you can have Headquarters out, which makes your opponent's basic Pokemon need 1 more energy to attack. And then Espathra EX in the active, which means that your opponent will then need 2 extra energy to attack if they have the basic Pokemon in their active. This is playing a non-EX Espathra that's different from the last one. This one has the Eye Strength attack. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. And you do play a double turbo in here, so you can attach a psychic and a double turbo and use Eye Strength for 0 and just lock something in the active potentially. It also has the attack Psychic, which does 30 plus 50 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So that actually could scale up pretty fast. One of the combos here we definitely need to talk about is Salvatore and Banette EX. So what Salvatore does is search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your Pokemon in play, and you have to find a Pokemon that does not have an ability, put that Pokemon onto the Pokemon you chose and evolve it. And you can use this on your first turn going second. You can use this immediately after benching a Pokemon, as long as the Pokemon you're finding doesn't have an ability. And luckily, that means Banette EX. So Banette EX has the Everlasting Darkness attack that does 30 damage for a psychic energy. And during your opponent's next turn, they cannot play any item cards from their hand. So if you go second, you start with Shuppet, you Lumineon for Salvatore, your Banette EX onto your active Shuppet, attach Psychic, and you're item locking from your very first turn of the game. It also has the attack Poltergeist that does 60 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand, which can be really deadly after you've used Everlasting Darkness for a bunch of turns. We also have a non-EX Banette in this deck. It has the ability Puppet Offering. Once during your turn, you may put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand and put this card into the Lost Zone. I'm not really a fan of this card. I feel like it's just tossed in here because they're already running the Banette line. It's not like this deck has a bunch of tech supporters or anything. It has 4 Research, 4 Iono, 2 Boss, and then that Salvatore. The Salvatore is probably going to be a one-time thing if you can use it early to get the Banette EX out. So yeah, this Puppet Offering Banette, while it's a cool card, I don't see the synergy here at all to play it in this deck. We also have the Lightning type Terastal Mewtwo EX, which is such a sick card. It has the Transfer Charge attack for Psychic Energy. Attach up to 2 basic Psychic Energies from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way you like. And the Photon Kinesis attack, which is the big one here. 10 damage plus 30 more for each Psychic Energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So this deck does play 10 Psychic Energy, so in theory this could get all the way up to 310 damage. Most of the time it's probably going to be somewhere in the high hundreds or low 200s. And as for new cards in this deck, of course, we've got that Fluttermane, the Salvatore we already mentioned, 4 Buddy Poffin, and a Hero Cape buffing the HP. So Banette EX with 350 HP is actually pretty cool. Item locking, 350 HP. Your opponent can't use Vacuum to get rid of the Hero Cape. Not too shabby. Next, we have a top 4 Dialga VSTAR deck list. using the new Metang from Temporal Forces. This new Metang has the ability Metal Manufacture. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic Metal Energy cards from there to your Pokemon in any way you like. Now, the nice thing about this Metang is we can set up multiple Metang and take multiple tries at this ability. So even if the first one doesn't work, we can try it again. And unlike something like Electric Generator, these are stage 1 Pokemon that are established on the board, and we can use them turn after turn. So an Electric Generator, once you use it, if you whiff with no energy, it's gone. It's in the discard pile. But with Metang, we could just try again if we have multiple Metangs, or we can just wait till next turn and try again then. Now, of course, the Pokemon we want to be putting all the energy onto is Origin Form Dialga VSTAR. Origin Form Dialga VSTAR has the Metal Blast attack, which does 40 damage plus 40 more damage for each metal energy attached to this Pokemon, so it can do a lot of damage. It also has the Star Chronos VSTAR power attack, which is the big draw to playing this card. It does 220 damage, and then you take another turn after this one. So this is an incredibly strong effect. You can take a knockout with Star Chronos, take another turn, then take a knockout with Metal Blast, or you could just set up a knockout on a very high HP Pokemon like Charizard EX, so Star Chronos for 220, take another turn, and then spend your next turn knocking out Charizard, maybe even setting up another Dialga V-Star on the bench with your Metang's abilities. This is one of those decks that is very much on the gray line between Rogue and Frontier and a tournament-ready deck. Because I can definitely see how this wins games. The Star Chronos V-Star power is incredibly strong. It can put out a ton of damage with Metal Blast. It has pretty good HP at 280 HP for a 2-prizer. It also has some good backup attackers, the Baskia Legion, which shuffles all of your basic energy from the discard pile into your deck, and then it does 20x damage for each energy. You got the Zamazenta that's pretty strong. You have Mew EX. But I can also see how this deck can falter to set up with a couple Metang abilities. Maybe you prize a Dialga V-Star, so you only have one to work with. The opponent one-shots your Dialga V-Star before you get to the Star Chronos. So I can definitely see both sides of the coin here for this deck. I wouldn't be surprised to see it doing well if a player hits the right matchups and gets lucky enough, but I also understand why it's down here in the Rogue tier. Moving on, we've got a Future Box deck, but this has some heavy focus on Iron Valiant EX. So Iron Valiant EX has the ability Tachyon Bits. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from your bench to the active spot, you may put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. This deck is running a good bit of ways to switch your Pokemon: 4 Switch Cart, 1 Switch, and then, of course, 4 Future Booster Energy Capsule, which is always a little awkward to say. So yeah, the Future Booster Energy Capsule gives your future Pokemon free retreat, and they do 20 more damage with their attacks. Speaking of attacks, Iron Valiant has the Laser Blade, which for Psychic Colorless does 200 damage. And if you have a couple Iron Crowns on the board, that's 240. If you have a Future Booster Energy Capsule on, that's 260. And you could ping a few times with Tachyon Bits. So this can definitely reach the numbers that you need to between the Tachyon Bits pings, the Iron Crown buff, and the Future Booster Energy Capsule buff as well. Of course, we also have the Iron Crown here, which can attack, do 50 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, and go through effects. We have Iron Leaves, which is going to be great for taking out Charizards. We have the new Miraidon with Accelerating Peak that's going to actually poke for some considerable damage, especially if we have multiple Iron Crown on the board and a Future Booster on the Miraidon. But more importantly, it accelerates energies really, really well. Iron Hands EX for the Amp you very much, and the Mew EX mostly there for the restart attack. New cards here, not including those Pokemon that we just went over. We've just got the Reboot Pod A-Spec and also Morty's Conviction, which is a fine draw supporter from this set. The Reboot Pod is an A-Spec that allows you to accelerate 1 basic energy from your discard pile to each of your future Pokemon. Sometimes this is a little awkward because you'll have a Pokemon like Iron Hands that you just want to put 4 energy on, but the reboot pod only lets you put 1 energy to each Pokemon. So that's kind of the shortcoming of reboot pod, is that it has to go 1-to-1. It can't go like 4 from the discard all to Iron Hands. But it's still a good card if you're playing all of these future Pokemon. It's definitely one of the top A specs to consider for the deck. Next, we've got more Miraidon EX. This time, it's heavily focused on Regieleki VMAX. Now, let's not forget as well that the Regieleki V has some good attacks. The first one doing 30 and Switch, and the second one, Lightning Wall, doing 100, and then it takes 100 less damage from attacks next turn. So, the Regieleki V is actually pretty powerful. Regieleki VMAX has 310 HP. The ability Transistor, which says your basic lightning Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and it has the Max Thunder and Lightning attack, which swings for 220, and Regieleki also has free retreat. So this Transistor ability, your basic lightning Pokemon do 30 more damage. Let's imagine that we have 2 of these Regieleki VMAXs on the board. That means your Ampu very much will be swinging for 180. That means that your Photon Blaster on Miraidon EX will swing for 280. Means your Raikou now has a max damage output of 280 as well. So yeah, the problem here is that we have 3 prize Pokemon on the bench. We have Regieleki VMAX worth 3 prizes. 310 HP isn't that easy to KO, but just having 3 prize liabilities on the board is probably going to be really awkward in this upcoming format, since we have mostly rotated out of the VMAX Pokemon. Regieleki VMAX is one of the VMAXs still lingering around. I don't really think this deck is too strong. I'd much rather just play Turbo Iron Hands with the future Pokemon. As for new cards here, we've just got the one Prime Catcher Ace spec. Next, we have a top 4 Roaring Moon EX deck. Roaring Moon EX was really popular and also doing really well in the pre-rotation format. Took a little while to pick up steam, but definitely made its name as a meta deck in the Paradox Rift format. Now, things are definitely changing. We lose Galarian Moltres V, we lose Battle VIP Pass, but we do gain the baby Roaring Moon. This non-EX Roaring Moon has 140 HP, and then with Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, all the way up to 200 HP, so it's a pretty tanky little guy. And it has the Vengeful Strike attack. It does 70 plus 10 more damage for each Ancient card in your discard pile. Now, this is not meant to reach insane numbers in this deck. You know, you're not going to be OHKOing big Pokemon with this attack, but what it will do is it gives you a single prize Pokemon to use to offset your opponent's prize trade, or clean up attacks, or set up attacks, so you're not forced to only use EX Pokemon for attacking. So that's the purpose of this single prize Roaring Moon in this deck. It's going to be focused on the Roaring Moon EX, but the baby Roaring Moon can definitely get in there and clean up attacks with a single prize, or poke damage and set up attacks for later. Next, we've got Arceus VSTAR with Zeraora VMAX, Zeraora VSTAR, Shaman VSTAR, Iron Leaves. This is a top 8 Arceus deck, and I will definitely deem this an Arceus pile. So let's talk about the Zeraora stuff. Zeraora VMAX, 320 HP. It has the Reactive Pulse attack, which for 2 lightning energy does 60 for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability. So that can actually do a ton of damage. Let's think about a Charizard EX board. Let's say they have Rotom V, they have Pidgeot EX, they have a Charizard EX, maybe they have another Charizard EX. So Reactive Pulse would be swinging for 240 at that point. And then we also have the Max Fist attack, which swings for 240, but has to discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. So even if we stop at 240 with the Reactive Pulse, it's a 320 HP Pokemon, weak to fighting. Fighting isn't too big of a deal. And for 2 energy, it does 240 damage if the opponent has 4 abilities on the board. So actually does swing for a really efficient amount of damage. Then we have the Zeraora VSTAR. There's just 1 copy of this in the deck. 270 HP, so less HP than the VMAX, but of course it only gives up 2 prizes. The first attack, Crushing Beat, 190, and you may discard a stadium card in play. The second attack is the V-Star power attack for 3 lightning and a colorless Lightning Storm Star. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon 4 times. You can choose the same Pokemon more than once. For each time you choose a Pokemon, do 60 damage to it. So you could do 60 damage to 4 different things. You could do 120 and 120. You could do 180 and 60. You could do 120, 60, 60, whatever you want. Really interesting card, but most of the time you're going to end up using Arceus V-Star's Starbirth as your V-Star power, which is why they only play one of the Zoroark V-Star in the deck. Then there's also Shaman V and Shaman V-Star. These Pokemon scale their damage output with the amount of prize cards that your opponent has taken. It's namely going to be very good against Charizard because it hits for grass type weakness. Similar with Iron Leaves EX, it hits for grass type weakness, so it's going to be good against Charizard. And for new cards here, we do have that Iron Leaves EX. We have the Airy supporter card. We have Mist Energy to prevent all effects of attacks to the Pokemon that the Mist Energy is attached to. And the A-Spec Maximum Belt, which says you do 50 more damage to EX Pokemon. Next up, we have a top 8 Gardevoir EX Raging Bolt EX deck. Gardevoir EX, no stranger to being in the meta, but Raging Bolt EX is brand new, and we're combining ancient Pokemon with the Gardevoir EX archetype. So Raging Bolt EX, 240 HP Dragon type, no weakness, has the ancient tag, and the attack for Lightning Fighting, discard any number of basic energy attached to your Pokemon in play. This attack does 70 damage for each energy discarded in this way. So the goal with this deck is going to be set up your Curlias as your draw engine, set up a Gardevoir EX, and then you can Psychic Embrace your Psychic energies to your Psychic Pokemon, and then Professor Sada's either a Fighting or Lightning to your Raging Bolt, and then attach the other one with your manual attachment for turn, and then you could discard all the Psychic energies that you accelerated with Psychic Embrace, so that you can do 70x the amount of energy discarded. So this is the new way that I guess we're trying to one-shot things with a Gardevoir EX deck. I do think that this just seems like a bit of a meme. Just the combination of Professor Sada's and Raging Bolt, and then putting Fighting and Lightning energy in a Gardevoir deck. It does definitely seem a little bit memey, but it has been getting some decent results in Japan, like this top 8 deck list we see here. So probably not going to be a tournament winning deck anytime soon, but definitely an interesting one that I wanted to highlight today. Next up, we've got a top 8 Gengar EX deck. Gengar EX has 310 HP, dark type, weak to fighting, and has the ability Gnawing Curse. Whenever your opponent attaches an energy card from their hand to one of their Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And then the attack Tricky Steps for 2 energy does 160, which is meh. But you may move an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon to one of their benched Pokemon. Now, this isn't the only way we have to move energy. We also have Crushing Hammer, and we also have the supporter card Giovanni's Charisma. Put an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon into their hand, and if you do, attach an energy card from your hand to your active Pokemon. So Gengar doesn't really need the energy acceleration that Giovanni's Charisma offers, but it is good to force energy back into your opponent's hand. So against something like a Charizard EX, where they're accelerating from the deck onto Charizard, and then they swing. Well, what if you Giovanni's Charisma one of the energy to their hand, and then use Gengar EX's attack to move one of the energy to one of their benched Pokemon? I can actually see a world where this functions and this works. It's pretty underpowered, only doing 160 damage, but I do like the energy manipulation theme of this deck. It actually can do some pretty cool stuff. Next, we have Hisuian Zoroark V-Star. Hisuian Zoroark V-Star has the ability that's essentially a Professor's Research on a V-Star ability. Discard your hand, draw 7. And then the Ticking Curse attack, 50 damage for each of your Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. So if you can get damage counters on all 6 of your Pokemon, that's 300 damage, but with a DTE that's 280. And then with the Maximum Belt, it hits the magical number of 330, so it can one-shot a Charizard EX. I really have never liked liked Hisuian Zoroark VSTAR. It's such a plain card. It just does damage and then discards your hand and draws 7. Like, it doesn't do anything that's interesting to me. It does scale its damage off of the amount of damage on your board or the amount of Pokemon that have damage, so that damage pump is useful to move damage around to make sure everything is damaged on your board. Also, Gape Jaw Bog, so whenever somebody benches a Pokemon, it gets 2 damage counters on it. This deck, of course, also naturally runs the Gengar with Netherworld Gate. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in your discard pile, you may put it onto your bench. And if you do, put 3 damage counters on this Pokemon. And the deck also runs 1 Psychic Energy, so the Screaming Circle attack can be used as well. Next up, we've got a top 8 Iron Valiant Gouging Fire Entei deck. Iron Valiant Entei is something that we had already seen in pre-rotation. Like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Meowscarada EX, these damage spread decks lost Metacham V, which is a big deal. Removes that Yoga Loop combo turn that was like the big power move these decks had. But Iron Valiant Entei gains a new attacker, Gouging Fire. Gouging Fire EX, 230 HP, and it swings for a whopping 260 damage. So it does a whole lot of damage, and Iron Valiant EX pings damage around. Entei V is still a pretty efficient attacker as well. Also there to use the Forest Hill Stone on. And we've got Delphox V, which can spread damage or snipe damage, so to speak, 120 to the active. Delphox V does 120 to the active and 120 to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon as well. Speaking of spreading damage and Meowscarada, we have another top 8 Meowscarada EX deck list. This one is the Bibarel version. Playing that Flutter Mane for some early game, maybe slowing down your opponent with it. Also going into the Technical Machine Evolution strategy with 3 Arven and 2 TM Evolution. So you can evolve up into your Florgato and your Bibarel as early as turn 1 going second. As for new cards in this deck, it's just going to be that Flutter Mane I mentioned, and also the Maximum Belt, so you can do plus 50 damage to EX Pokemon. Here we've got a top 8 Roaring Moon EX deck list, not too different from the one we looked at, playing 3 EX and 2 non-EX, except this is also playing a 2-2 line of Darkrai V-Star. Darkrai V-Star has the Star Abyss ability, which is a V-Star power. During your turn, you may put up to 2 item cards from your discard pile into your hand. That can be an ace spec like Prime Catcher, or it could be Dark Patch to accelerate energy, or a switch when you need to move your active Pokemon. So Darkrai V-Star, very powerful, especially because it can get ace spec items back from the discard pile into your hand. And it also has the Dark Pulse attack that does 30 damage for each dark energy attached to all of your Pokemon. Now this does play 13 energy, and it plays the 4 Dark Patch, it plays the 3 Professor Sadas, and it has the Darkrai's ability that can get back Dark Patches, so you can actually get a pretty good amount of dark energy onto the board this way. You also have the Luxray that can be played from your hand directly to the bench, and 1 Reversal Energy, and when you have that Reversal Energy on your Luxray and it's activated, that'll count as 3 darkness energy towards Darkrai's Dark Pulse attack as well. And last but not least is Tinkaton EX with Dudunsparce. So Tinkaton EX has the big hammer attack. It does 30 damage for each card in your hand. And remember what Dudunsparce does. It shuffles itself, it draws 3 cards and shuffles itself into the deck. So even if you just have, let's say, a 6-card hand, you draw for turn, that's a 7-card hand. You activate the Dunsparce, draw 3 more, that's a 10-card hand. You activate the Dunsparce 1 more time, that's a 13-card hand. You rare candy Tinkaton down, you attach DTE. Now you're at a 10-card hand and you're swinging for 280 with Big Hammer. So pretty impressive. This deck is also playing the non-EX Tinkaton, which allows you to discard a card from your hand, draw 3 cards, and Special Hammer does 90 plus 90 more for 180 if you have any Special Energy attached to this Pokemon. And this deck also plays, this is the first time I've seen this in a deck, the A-Spec Neo Upper Energy. If this card is attached to a Stage 2 Pokemon, it's essentially a double Rainbow Energy. So you can attach this to your Tinkaton non-EX and swing for 180. You could attach it to the Tinkaton EX and not have the double Turbo Energy holding you down. This is a really cool deck. There's a lot of evolution stuff to set up here, so I'm not sure that this is actually very viable. It did get top 8 at a City League though, and the whole point of this video is sharing interesting, fun rogue decks that had some success at Japanese City Leagues. So those are all the deck lists I have to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to support the channel with the coupon codes and affiliate links in the description down below, and subscribe for more Pokemon TCG content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.